So hello, and welcome to Foundations of Political Thought. My name is John Phillips, and I'm Assistant Professor of Political Science here at Austin Peay State University. This is my second year here with Austin Peay, and the third time I taught this course online. Hopefully by now, most of the kinks have been worked out. My PhD is in Political Science from Brown University, and prior to coming here, I was also a visiting Assistant Professor in Political Science at Duke University and at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. Prior to that, I was also a postdoctoral fellow associated with the philosophy department at the University of Arizona. All right, so now that we've gotten the credentials out of the way, I have some bad news for you guys. This course is going to commit some brutality upon you, and in some ways I feel kind of badly about that. Now what I mean here is not that the papers and quizzes are going to be awful, though I suppose some of you are going to feel that way. What I mean is that if you do your job in this course, you're going to end up seeing the political world differently than when you began your journey. Part and parcel of the study of political theory is a certain loss of innocence. Being a political science major already involves a kind of loss of innocence. Many majors go into the study of political science out of a kind of idealism, that there's a common good to be reached out there, and that there's got to be a better way to practice politics than the way we currently do it in the United States. But then, in the course of their study, majors often realize that the political world, or at least a lot about the political world, can be relatively well explained by some fairly unflattering motives, like greed and self-interest. For example, politicians, to the extent that they're motivated by any principle at all, are motivated by the principle that if they're going to get anything at all done, they first have to get elected. And getting elected requires a fair amount of sacrifices on the count of principle. Now, the kind of brutality that's going to be perpetrated on you in this course is different from the illusion breaking of ordinary political science. In this class, the brutality is the inevitable fracturing or loss of a certain wholeness, a loss of some of those popular myths we grow up with about how values ultimately fit together. In particular, the certainty many of you probably share that there is ultimately a single right answer about how to fit our various political values together is going to be sorely tested throughout the semester. The problem is that once you become aware of this fracturing, there is no going back. My job here is kind of like being your older brother or sister who told you that Santa Claus wasn't real. You might not believe me at first, but once the cat is out of the bag, there's no way of getting rid of that nagging doubt. Now, on the one hand, what could be more obvious than the fact that our values conflict? Every time we want something, we know we must sacrifice something of lesser value to get it. To get money, we sacrifice our labor. To get an education, we sacrifice some time with our families and time with our friends. But at the political level, a lot of people seem to think that matters are somehow different. That we can be the freest people and the most equal and the most secure and the richest and the most virtuous and meritorious, that somehow, at the end of the tunnel, there's a way to organize society that gives us the best of all possible world. This kind of utopian thinking is everywhere, even among the authors we're going to be studying this semester. And yet, because of the pervasive and fundamental disagreements you will be experiencing, you're not going to be able to shake the feeling that no matter what political decision is made, and no matter what political views you end up espousing, someone somewhere is going to be unhappy. Someone somewhere is going to be sacrificed. No matter what you do, someone is going to be hurt, and their ability to live their lives is going to be curtailed somehow. In addition to moving us away from utopianism, another way in which this course attacks political innocence is by constantly making things more complicated than you originally realized. The world will become a little clearer in some ways, but will also become again more fractured and less of a comprehensive whole. For example, we will highlight the distinction between the right thing to do, sometimes that's called the problem of justice, and how should we decide what the right thing to do is, and that's sometimes called the problem of political authority. So when we discuss any law, there's going to be at least two senses, in reality actually many more than that, in which a law can be the right law. It could be the one whose content you find the most just, or it could be the one that was decided in the way you find the most authoritative. Laws can be justified and not justified at the same time. And we have to find some way of squaring that fact with other facts that at some point we have to make a choice. We have to decide what to do or not do, and ultimately be responsible for those choices too. What I hope for this course is that you develop a kind of vocabulary or language to talk about some common political problems that societies like the United States face on a regular basis. Courses very similar to this one are taught all over the country, and indeed all over the world. And what they do, I think, is to help develop a set of common frameworks. Indeed, a kind of language for approaching our political disagreements. You might be wondering, why do I need a new language? English works just fine for arguing with everybody I know, so why do I need to learn political theory in order to have an argument about how we ought to live together? And you're probably right as far as your family or friends and maybe even your community is concerned. You've been brought up to participate in a shared framework of meaning. So what a word means in the context of your family and your close friends is pretty much a settled matter. People know intuitively what you're talking about when you say freedom or democracy, when you say leveling the playing field, or when you say equal opportunity. You have some basis for a shared understanding about what you're talking about. The problem, though, is that, and the reason why command of sort of your local set of meanings is not enough, is that as soon as you reach the wider world, there's no real agreement about what these terms or concept means. To some people, democracy, for instance, means the rule of the majority, and to others it means an equal consideration of each person's interests. For some people, democracy is an exclusively political concept, whereas for others, democracy should pervade society far outside the realm of government and public decision-making, into, for instance, the family or the workplace. For some people, freedom means being left alone by the government, but for others, it means being able to master one's own destiny, sometimes with the help of the government. We need courses like this one, and other courses like it, if we're going to raise our heads above the sand of our own backyard, so to speak, and have productive conversations about what to do at the national and international level. Even when we don't end up agreeing on what to do, we're at least going to acquire a better understanding of what it is exactly that motivates our disagreements. Let me give you a story to kind of illustrate my point here. In the 1760s, there was a priest in Paris, France, which is my hometown, by the way. His name was Abbé Lapet, and Lapet ministered to the deaf and dumb, those unfortunate souls at the time who could neither speak nor hear. What Lapet noticed was that the deaf and dumb had developed a kind of rudimentary sign language in order to crudely communicate with one another and with their families and close ones. Now, at the time, the deaf and dumb were considered to be simpletons, what we would today call mentally disabled. What Lapet did for the deaf and dumb, though, was actually quite remarkable. He decided to codify and develop a more complete and more detailed universal sign language that enabled the deaf and dumb and their families to communicate with one another. And then something remarkable happened. As people learned this new language, they began to realize that the deaf and dumb were not simpletons, but actually were just as smart and as capable as anybody else. They were just unable to talk or hear. To put it another way, their problems were more physical than mental. The acquisition of a common language, right, this universal sign language, was remarkably liberating for the deaf and dumb. Imagine not being able to communicate with anybody around you, and everybody having some wrong idea about you, and now suddenly being able to get your point of view across. Deaf and dumb, this new language also revealed that the character of a misunderstanding that had been going on for centuries. So the acquisition of a common framework for communicating didn't just improve communication, but it dispelled some prejudices and falsehoods that were very common at the time. In a very real way, language not only improved communication, but dispelled all the prejudices and falsehoods about the deaf and dumb, though, of course, prejudice takes a long time to die. even when the facts and the logic and so on and so forth are fairly well settled. Now, I want to suggest that the importance of this class is very much like the importance of developing a universal sign language. If we don't develop a common framework for analyzing and conceptualizing what it is that governments are supposed to be doing, we risk constantly misunderstanding one another. And worse, constantly misunderstanding what's going on in the world. And we risk treating intelligent people who don't share our framework like the deaf and the dumb of Paris in the 18th century. Okay. Now that you've listened to this intro lecture, I encourage you to explore some of the other materials on the course page listed under Day 1, including the syllabus and the guidelines for papers and critiques. And if you have any questions, the syllabus definitely tells you how to get in touch.